At exactly 8:13 this morning, I found out I wasn't a real person. According to an app I never downloaded, every single student at my university has a secret role. Main character, side character, extra, NPC. Mine didn't say any of those. Mine said redacted. And before this story is over, that glitchy little app is going to make me rich, feared, and impossible to ignore. And it's going to cost the luckiest man alive everything he has. But to get why that matters, you need to see me 2 hours earlier. 6 a.m. Bus. One earbud, because the other one died in 2022. $4.13 to survive the week. That's not a budget, that's a hostage situation. My name's Kai Mercer. Commuter kid. Background character. Remember that word. Because the universe, it turns out, meant it literally. So I'm holding the door because I'm me, and the herd stampedes through without a thank you, and somebody's elbow sends my last $2 coffee straight down the front of Julian Ashe. Julian Ashe, trust fund royalty, the literal main character of Holloway University. He looked at the stain, then at me. Then he smiled for his audience and said, loud enough for the whole atrium, "This is why they shouldn't let scholarship kids through the front door." Phones came out. He made me apologize on camera while the crowd giggled. Then he turned to his friends and said, casual as a weather report, "Remind me to have Dad's office look into his funding." My scholarship, my entire life here. Over coffee he walked into, and they clapped. They actually clapped for him. I stood there holding an empty cup and said nothing, because that's what extras do. I didn't know it yet, but spilling that coffee was about to become the single luckiest mistake of my life. Then my phone buzzed. Cracked screen, 3% battery, and an app I 100% did not download, glowing cyan like something out of a fever dream. Cast new role detected. And I looked up, and the world had labels on it. Little glowing tags floating over everybody's heads like the world's pettiest video game. Over the crowd, extra side character. Over Julian in warm gold, a soft halo around him. Main character. No cap, it was literally hovering over him like he'd paid for premium. And over me. I lifted my phone and my stomach dropped. Not NPC. Not extra. Just one word glitching, red at the edges. Redacted. Cool. Cool. Even the magic scam app didn't know what I was. Julian turned to leave, tossing one more clean yourself up champ over his shoulder, still smirking like my humiliation was a pre-workout. And on my screen under his gold label, a new button pulsed. Siphon. Contempt detected. I want to be clear that I had no idea what I was doing. I was a broke kid with a haunted phone and a caffeine deficiency. I tapped it out of pure spite. Cast siphon successful. Luck +1. Luck +2. Luck +4. Hidden achievement unlocked. First pull. The food chain has noticed you. A thread of gold peeled off Julian, floated across the atrium like it had somewhere better to be, and sank into my chest, and the app just kept dinging, numbers climbing like a slot machine that had finally picked a side. Julian frowned mid-stride, like he'd misplaced something he didn't have a word for. Then he was gone, and I stood there, vibrating, feeling weirdly, stupidly lucky, which, for me, was a brand new sensation. It would not be the last thing I took from Julian Ashe. It wasn't even the biggest thing I'd take that week. It started small. The vending machine coughed up 2 granola bars for the price of 1, and I didn't even have the price of 1. Then I jammed my hand in my hoodie pocket out of habit and found a folded 50. A 50. I have turned that pocket inside out for bus fare. There was no 50. There is now a 50. Down the hall, a professor I was quietly failing announced the deadline got pushed a week for reasons. Reasons. Me. I was the reasons. 20 years of the universe ignoring my emails, and suddenly it's leaving me tips. I looked at that gold thread still glowing faintly in my chest and thought, okay, what exactly did I just steal? And how much more is where that came from? Here's the thing that kept me up that night, though. Not the money. Not the magic. Everyone else had a clean little label. Extra. Side character. Main character. The whole cast list of my sad little world, neatly assigned. But every time I caught my reflection, mine glitched. Redacted. Like a name blacked out on a document nobody wanted me to read. You don't redact a nobody. You don't erase an extra. There's nothing to erase. Which meant somewhere at some point, I'd been something worth deleting. I didn't have the words for it yet. But I knew, bone deep, that this app didn't glitch me up from the bottom. Something glitched me down. And I was about to be very, very annoying about finding out why. Naturally, I tried to break it immediately. First, I aimed it at a nice girl from my stats class, who actually smiled at me. Nothing. No button, no gold thread, no dice. I basically stood there pointing a cracked phone at a stranger like an absolute menace, and the app just went dim like, "Not like this, buddy." Took me the whole morning to crack the rule, and honestly, it's the most brutally honest thing I've ever learned. The siphon button only lit up over someone who was looking down on me. The nice ones. Locked. The ones who saw me as a person. Off limits. But the second somebody sneered, dismissed me, treated me like furniture, the app went bright cyan and basically handed me a straw. My superpower ran on other people's contempt, which at Holloway was an infinite resource. I field tested it in a study group with Bryce, a TA who wore a blazer to a group project and corrected my grammar while getting the actual math wrong. When I tried to explain the problem, he did the little awe, let the scholarship kid try chuckle and wave me off. Bright cyan. Siphon. Cast borrowed, brilliance acquired. Roll X plus 40. Progress to extra, 82%. And suddenly the problem just unfolded in my head, clean and obvious, like someone turned the lights on in a room I'd been fumbling around for years. I walked the whole group through it, elegant, effortless, using Bryce's own stolen fluency. He sat there blinking while I ate his lunch academically. Was it cheating? Absolutely. Did the guy who chuckled at me earn it? Also absolutely. The contempt economy, baby. Business was booming. 2 days later, I sat an exam I'd normally survive by vibes and prayer, and I demolished it. Every siphon scrap of brilliance I'd farmed off condescending rich kids, all pointed at one scantron. I finished first. The professor who once called me consistent, which is professor for please leave, actually double-took when he saw my score. My grades ticked up. A paid research assistant slot opened up, and my name was somehow already on it. The gold threads were compounding, like the world's pettiest investment account. For the first time in my life, opportunity wasn't a locked door I pressed my face against. It was sliding into my DMs. And I'll be honest with you, it felt incredible. That should have been the warning sign. It wasn't. Then I met Zoe. I ducked onto a rooftop to hide from my own good luck, and there she was, teal streak in her hair, paint up to her elbows, sketchbook open. She looked at me, actually looked, not through, and offered me half her sandwich like it was nothing. No angle. No sneer. Reflex, I checked my phone. Her label read side character, but the siphon button was grayed out and under it tiny letters. Respect cannot siphon. I stared at that longer than I want to admit. Everyone at this school was a resource to me now. A thread to pull. And here was the one person the system flat out refused to let me steal from. Because she was the one person treating me like I was already somebody. I put the phone away. I ate the sandwich. We talked for 3 hours. Remember Zoe, the one person I couldn't steal from, was about to become the only reason there'd be anything left of me worth saving. Zoe Nakamura drew people for fun, strangers on the bus, the lunch lady, me apparently, because when I wasn't looking she'd sketched my dumb, tired face and captioned it "Guy who thinks nobody sees him." Which, ouch, accurate. She didn't ask what I scored or who my dad was. She asked what I actually liked, And when I said I used to build little apps before life got expensive, she lit up like that was the most interesting thing she'd heard all week. I hadn't felt seen in so long I'd forgotten it was a feeling. 20 years of being background, and this paint-stained girl on a roof clocked me in an afternoon. I remember thinking, whatever this system is, whatever I'm becoming, I don't want to become someone she'd draw with a different caption. That night I caught it for the first time. I was checking my hair in a bathroom mirror, a thing I never did, being a gremlin, and I watched my own hand come up and fire off this slick little finger gun at my reflection, with a smile that was way too smooth. Julian's finger gun. Julian's smile. The exact no worries, buddy energy that had ruined my morning. It came out of me automatic, easy, like it had always lived there. I froze, because I hadn't just stolen his luck. Somewhere in those gold threads, I'd been pulling in pieces of him, his mannerisms, his flavor. And if that was the price of the luck, of the money, of finally not being invisible, I hadn't read the fine print. And the fine print, it turns out, reads back. After that, I told myself I'd be careful. I was not careful. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being broke your whole life. When the door finally opens, you don't tiptoe, you sprint. And Holloway was a buffet of people happy to look down on me, which meant an all-you-can-eat glow-up. NPC. Then extra. Then named extra. I genuinely fist-pumped at named extra. That's how low the bar was. Cast roll-up, side character. Luck compounding. Wealth momentum, active. Hidden achievement. Speedrun, fastest climb on record. Every trust fund kid who curled their lip at my hoodie, every legacy who talked over me, fed the meter. My label climbed. My luck compounded. I wasn't grinding a game. I was the game, and the whales were paying to lose. The money got real. That siphoned brilliance. I aimed it where it counted, rebuilt one of my old dead apps into a little design tool, and a chance connection I definitely engineered turned it into a paid gig. Then 3. I paid rent on time for the first time in my adult life, and almost cried into the bank app. New hoodie that fit. Groceries that weren't just the sad noodles. I moved out of the closet. I'd been subletting into an actual apartment with an actual window. 20 years of counting coins. And now I was the guy who left a tip. It's giving stability. It's giving main character. And I sat in my new place that first night thinking, I'd finally cracked the code the rich kids were born holding. I hadn't. I just borrowed their pen. Meanwhile, Julian Ashe was falling apart, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the front row seat. The golden boy started missing. Bricked a layup he could make in his sleep, in front of everyone. His card got declined at the cafe he basically owned. His crew, the ones who clapped for him at the door, started sitting one seat further away each week, the way rich kids abandon a sinking stock. I heard his father's voice through a phone one afternoon, cold as a ledger. Ashes don't lose, Julian. Fix whatever this is. That gold shimmer that used to hang on him like expensive cologne. Flickering, thinning. Every thread I pulled was a little less luck holding his perfect life together, and he kept looking at his own hands like they'd betrayed him. I told myself he had it coming. I told myself a lot of things that semester. Most of them were just Julian's voice, wearing mine. And a desperate main character, I was about to learn, is the most dangerous thing in any story. That's when the janitor cornered me. Old guy, blue coveralls, keying like a medieval jailer, and eyes that did this unsettling little flat buffer, like a video still loading. He grabbed my arm in the boiler room hall and said, "Quiet, I can see it on you." The cyan, the pull, I nearly dropped my expensive new phone. Nobody could see the system. Then he said the thing that stuck a splinter in my brain for weeks. You think you're grinding, kid. You're not grinding. You're a glitch. And you know what happens to glitches. He leaned in and his eyes buffered and he said, "They get patched." I laughed it off. Told him to enjoy his mop. God, I was insufferable by then. But I remembered his face. I'd be seeing a lot more of it. And look, I ignored him because I was winning, and winners don't listen to the guy with the mop. That's not me talking, by the way. That's exactly the kind of thing that had started living in my head rent-free. 6 weeks ago, I was the guy holding the door. Now people nodded at me in the atrium. Professors learned my name. A girl who'd never looked at me twice laughed too hard at my jokes. And instead of it feeling like a miracle, it started to feel like something I was owed. That's the tell right there. The gratitude was draining out of me, and something colder was filling the space. I didn't notice, because when you're rising that fast, you don't feel the parts of yourself you're leaving behind. You just feel the altitude. Then one night, the app showed me something it wasn't supposed to. I'd climbed all the way to side character. A real label finally, no more redaction, and I was gassed about it. But as I stared, the text under my role glitched, and for half a second, a deleted string bled through underneath, like text someone tried to erase but didn't scrub clean. It read, "Protagonist cut." I blinked and it was gone. Just side character again, clean and cyan. But I'd seen it. Protagonist. Cut. Not you could be, not level up to unlock, past tense. Like it had already happened. Like I'd been the main character once, in some draft of my own life, and somebody had crossed me out. My hands were shaking, and for once it wasn't the caffeine. Julian made his move at the winter showcase, because by then he had nothing left to lose. His starting spot gone. His entourage gone. His father no longer taking his calls. The whole golden life had drained out from under him in 6 weeks, and he couldn't prove why. But some animal part of him had connected the dots to the scholarship kid who kept rising exactly as fast as he fell. Cornered animal, designer suit. He got up with a mic in front of the whole gala, donors, deans, everyone who mattered, and turned the spotlight on me. "Let's hear from our rising star," he said, dripping. "Kai, was it? The scholarship success story. Tell everyone about your process. Or should we talk about the knockoff watch and the bus pass?" The crowd did that awful ripple of laughter. He'd done his homework, dug up every broke, embarrassing detail of my old life, and laid it out like evidence. 6 weeks ago, that would have deleted me on the spot. But Julian, sweet luckless Julian, had made one fatal mistake. He'd looked down on me. In public. With his whole chest. So I opened the app, and this time the button wasn't siphon. It was brighter. Bigger. Cast role override available. Target main character. I tapped it, and the whole room's gold ripped off Julian at once and slammed into me. Not a thread, a flood. I felt his entire role pour into me. The posture, the charisma, the effortless plot armor certainty that the universe would catch me. I straightened up, and I felt the room turn like a flower to the sun. I took the mic out of his hand. He let me stunned, and I owned it. Funny, sharp, warm, untouchable. I told a story about being broke that had them laughing with me and clapping. And I watched the donors fall in love, and the deans nod and Julian shrink into the crowd. He used to rule. It was the best I'd ever felt. It should have terrified me. I wrote it. God, I wrote it. The applause, the "we should get coffee." The dean's card pressed into my hand. The girl from stats suddenly very interested. I was the main character, fully, wearing Julian's whole life like a suit that fit way too well. In my pocket, my phone was buzzing a warning I didn't look at. Cast identity bleed, 41%. Recommend disengage. 41%. Nearly half of the person running that room wasn't me anymore. But that's the trap, isn't it? The higher you get, the less you can feel the ground. I wasn't thinking about Zoe or Mark or the cut string under my name. I was thinking, finally, I'm the one they see. And then a nervous freshman bumped my elbow, and I found out exactly who I'd become. The kid was maybe 18. Hoodie, cheap shoes. Nervous. He fumbled a tray and a drink went across my borrowed designer sleeve, and he started stammering an apology, and I watched myself, felt myself, look down at him with Julian's exact smile and say loud, so the room could enjoy it, "It's fine." Accidents happen when you don't belong here. And the crowd laughed. On cue. For me. And the kid's face just crumpled. Folded up small the way I used to fold up small. I knew that face. I'd worn that face at the door with the coffee. And I made it happen to someone else, for a laugh. And for one horrible second it felt good. That's the part I can't scrub. It felt good because I wasn't me. I was the thing that used to hurt me, and I was wearing it like a crown. And then I saw Zoe, standing at the edge of the light, sketchbook down at her side, just looking at me. Not angry. Worse, disappointed, in that quiet way that goes straight through the ribs. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her face said, "Who are you right now?" loud as a slap. And I turned to find her in the crowd and caught my own reflection in the tall dark window behind the stage. And it wasn't my face. For one full second it was Julian's, golden smug hollow. The bleed made flesh. I'd stolen so much of him, there was barely a Kai left holding the mic. Zoe turned and walked out, and the applause kept going, warm and gold and meaningless, for a person who wasn't there anymore. I ducked out a side door and the Overwrite started draining, gold bleeding back out of me. And I got shaky and cold and finally, mine again, mostly. I pulled out my phone with hands I didn't trust, and my label was seizing. Redacted, then protagonist, then redacted again, strobing like a broken sign, like the system itself couldn't decide what I was. And then in the corner of the screen, the corner of my actual vision, something new. A single red cursor. Blinking. Slow. Patient. The way a cursor blinks when someone's about to type. Or delete. I didn't know what it was yet, but it had shown up the exact moment I stopped being fully me. Like it had been waiting for an opening. Like something, somewhere, had just looked up from its work and noticed me. I tried to delete it. Sat on my floor at 3 a.m. and held my thumb on that cyan icon until the little X came up and pressed uninstall, and the button just grayed out. Cannot remove active role, of course. You don't get to quit the thing that's eating you. I kept seeing the freshman's face fold up, kept hearing my own voice say, "You don't belong here," in a tone I'd spent my whole life on the receiving end of. 6 weeks ago I was broke and invisible, and I'd have given anything to be seen. Now I was seen, and rich, and climbing, and I'd used it to make some scared kid feel exactly the way the world had always made me feel. That's the math that kept me on the floor. I got everything I wanted, and became everything I hated to get it. Zoe found me on the roof, because of course the one person I couldn't steal from was the one who showed up. She didn't yell. She just said, "The guy I met a few weeks ago shared his last granola bar with me and apologized for it being crushed. That guy wouldn't have said that to a freshman. Beat. So where'd he go?" And I didn't have an answer that wasn't an excuse, so I told her the truth, all of it. The app, the labels, the siphon, the bleed, that I'd been stealing pieces of people, and they were stealing me back. I expected her to call me insane or a monster. Instead, she got very quiet, and she looked at the cyan flickering in my eye, and she said, "Kai, what color am I?" And I checked and I said, "Teal," and something in her face changed. She grabbed my hand, didn't flinch at the glitch, just held it, and told me to remember one thing that was mine. Not stolen. Actually mine. And I thought about 6 a.m. buses and crushed granola bars and building dumb little apps at 2 a.m. because I loved it before it was ever worth money. And the app did something new. Cast anger set. Save point Kai Mercer. A steady cyan, my cyan, not gold, settled over me. And for the first time in weeks my head was quiet and completely mine. Anchor, the system called it. A save point of who I actually was, that the bleed couldn't overwrite. Later that day I found the freshman and apologized properly, no crowd, no audience. He looked at me like I was insane. Fair, but it was the first thing I'd done in weeks that felt like me. Which, apparently, was old Mark's cue. The janitor was waiting by the boiler room the next morning, keyring in hand, And this time I didn't blow him off. He looked at the steady cyan on me and grunted, anchored. Good. Means you're worth talking to. He led me down a service hall where the lights buffered like his eyes, to a door I'd walked past 100 times, and he unlocked it with a key that shouldn't have fit. You keep asking why you're redacted, he said. You want the real answer, or you want to keep pretending this is a video game. I said the real answer. He pushed the door open, and behind it wasn't the boiler room. It was a gray, glitching nowhere, a backstage to the entire world, and the temperature of my whole life dropped 10 degrees. He called it the margins. It was full of people, faded ones, half erased, drifting, mouths moving with no sound, like footage left out in the sun. A woman reading a book with no pages. A boy waiting at a bus stop that went nowhere. And I swear a second mark dimmer, mopping a floor that wasn't there. My mark saw me clock it and said flat, "The world's written, kid. Every one of us got a role assigned. Extra, side character, main character. Assigned, not earned. And I did what you did. Found the pull. Climbed the cast list. Overwrote myself all the way up." He gestured at the drifting husks. "And overwrote myself all the way out. Now I'm an extra who mops, and that's the leftover. Be grateful you can still see your own hands." I asked him the question that had been eating me since the mirror. Then why am I redacted? If everybody gets a role, why won't it show mine? And old Mark went very still. He looked up at the label strobing over my head, redacted, red at the edges. And for a long moment he didn't say anything. Then quiet, because you're not like these poor souls. They're NPCs who reached too high and got erased. But you, his buffering eyes fixed on me. You didn't glitch up from the bottom, kid. You got glitched down. That redaction isn't an empty slot. It's a cover-up. Somebody wrote you as something important, and then somebody crossed you out on purpose. The red cursor blinked at the edge of my vision. And I think, Mark said, it's about to notice you noticed. After the margins, I stopped grinding roles and started digging. Mark said someone crossed me out on purpose, and I needed to know who holds the pen. So I pushed the app somewhere it clearly didn't want to go, held my thumb on my own redacted label, and just refused to let go. And something unlocked. Cast debug vision enabled. You can now read the layer beneath. And the world peeled. Suddenly I could see it. Faint scrolling text hanging in the air behind everything. Stage directions, notes in a margin. Julian enters, confident. Crowd laughs on cue. The whole campus was running on a script, and I was reading it over the world's shoulder. It was the loneliest thing I've ever seen. Everyone I knew, saying lines someone wrote for them, and none of them could tell. Debug vision let me follow the script upstream, past the campus, past the notes, into a place the system called the drafts. Folders and folders of deleted text, floating in the dark like a graveyard of ideas someone changed their mind about. And there near the bottom, flagged in red, was a file with my name on it. Not Kai Mercer, NPC, not extra number 4. The header read Mercer K. Role protagonist. And stamped across the whole thing, red and final, cut. I'd been the main character. Not a wannabe. Not a climber. The actual protagonist of this whole story, written, drafted, real. And then someone had opened my file and deleted me, and slid an extra into my spot so nobody would notice the gap. I sat in that basement and read my own obituary, written before I was born. There was a note, an editor's note in that red ink, right beside the CUT stamp, and it explained everything and made me furious all at once. It read, "Protagonist too unpredictable, makes choices we did not write, refuses the arc, breaks the plot, recommend removal, replace with compliant background asset, too unpredictable, makes choices we didn't write." They didn't cut me for being weak or broke or a nobody. They cut me for being too real, for being a person instead of a puppet. Every time I'd felt invisible, overlooked, skipped, it wasn't bad luck. It was a decision. Somebody looked at a character who wouldn't stay on script and chose to erase him, and hand his life to someone easier to steer. 20 years of why does it never happen for me? Turns out the answer was because someone made sure it wouldn't. And then, right next to my file, I saw another one flagged the same red, teal accent instead of cyan. I opened it already knowing somehow. Nakamura Z. Status gut. Editor's note, sees too clearly. Will not perform. Cannot be directed. Zoe. Cut just like me. And suddenly all of it made sense. Why she was kind when kindness got you nothing here. Why she saw me when I was invisible. Why the system physically could not let me siphon her. It wasn't that she respected me exactly. It was that she had no assigned role left to defend, no script to protect, nothing the author had a claim on. She wasn't playing a side character. She'd been deleted out of the cast entirely and just kept living anyway. Off the page. Free. The only genuinely free person I'd ever met. I told Zoe on the roof, because where else? I showed her the file. Her file. And I watched her go very still, the teal flickering at the edge of her eyes, and she said, quiet. I always felt like I was standing slightly outside my own life. Like I forgot my lines and nobody noticed because I never had any. She laughed, but it cracked. I thought I was broken. No, I said. You were deleted. Same as me. We're the two mistakes they scrubbed out. And she looked at me, and for the first time neither of us was the only glitch in the room. Two cut characters on a rooftop, off the page, unwritten, holding the only proof either of us existed. It should have felt like doom. It felt, weirdly, like the first honest thing that had ever happened to me. That's when the red cursor woke up. It had been blinking at the corner of my eye for weeks, slow and patient. Now it snapped to the center of my vision and started moving fast, and red text stamped itself across the whole world like a rejection letter. Cast anomaly detected. Deleted asset active. Revision required. Deleted asset active. That was me. I'd spent weeks reading the author's files, poking at drafts I was never supposed to open, and I'd finally made too much noise. Somewhere upstream, the pen had stopped writing and turned, and looked directly at the thing it thought it had erased. Zoe grabbed my hand. The rooftop flickered like a bad signal, and I understood, way too late, that you don't get to read the story without the story reading you back. The author knew I was still here, and it does not like loose ends. The revision came for me the way deletion always does, quietly, then all at once. First, the luck reversed. Every gold thread I'd banked drained out. My card declined, my apps crashed, my new life unspooling faster than I'd built it. Then it got scarier. People stopped seeing me. The barista I chatted with every day looked right through me. A guy from my research group called me sorry, do we, and wandered off mid-sentence. My name glitched off the class roster, off my own mailbox, off a group chat where the messages I'd sent were just gone like I'd never typed them. The world was running find and delete on me in real time, and every version of Kai it scrubbed made the next person forget a little more. I was being unwritten, and I could feel the margins, cold and gray, opening up under my feet like a trapdoor. I looked down at my own hand, and the fingertips were going gray, translucent. Buffering Mark's exact glitch, spreading up my knuckles. I was becoming one of the drifting husks I'd seen in the margins, a faded extra mouthing lines nobody could hear. And the worst part was how gentle it felt. Deletion doesn't hurt. It just quietly convinces the world you were never worth keeping, until the world agrees, and then you agree too. I felt myself starting to forget my own name, started thinking maybe it was fine, maybe the author was right, maybe an unwritten character should just let go. That's the real weapon, not the bad luck. The soft, reasonable voice that tells a deleted person they were always meant to be deleted. I almost bought it. Then my phone lit up the anchor. My save point. Kai Mercer. And I remembered I had a save point for exactly this. So I did the most Kai thing possible. I got petty about it. I walked into the biggest lecture hall on campus, packed with the exact kind of people who'd spent years looking down on me, and I let them. Let them smirk, let them mutter, "Who's this guy?" Let the contempt roll in, and I opened the app all the way. Cast mass recast. Targets 214. Anchoring to narrative. Every sneer in that room lit cyan at once, and I pulled not to climb, not to steal a life, just to grab enough narrative weight to stop sliding off the page. Dozens of threads slammed into me, and my gray hands went solid again. I wasn't disappearing anymore. I'd used the whole room's disregard to nail myself back into the story. Turns out being underestimated by 200 people at once is a genuinely renewable resource. The revision surged back harder, red static clawing at me, and Zoe stepped in front of it. Just walked right into the delete beam like it was a spring drizzle, and it passed straight through her. Didn't even flicker her, because you can't delete what's already been deleted. She was off the page, out of the author's reach, the one immovable thing in a world that could be rewritten on a whim. "It can't touch me," she said, grabbing my collar, teal steady against all that red. "So it can't touch you while you're holding on." She was my anchor made flesh, a save point with a pulse. And standing there in the storm, gripping the one hand the author couldn't erase, I stopped being a bug to be patched. I started being a problem with backup. And then, of all people, Julian showed up. Except there was no gold left on him. I'd siphoned it all, and the revision had taken the rest. He looked like a photograph left in the rain. The perfect face, the designer everything, and absolutely nobody home. A main character with the main character deleted. He stared at me, and where everyone else had forgotten I existed, he remembered, because I'd stolen so much of him that we were tangled together in the story now, two halves of one deleted mess. And then Julian Ashe, the guy who made me apologize on camera, the guy who never once said please in his gilded life, grabbed my sleeve and begged, "Whatever you took, whatever's left, please. I don't know how to be nobody." I'd fantasized about this exact moment for weeks. It tasted like nothing. Then softer, seeing the gray creeping up my arm. "What did they do to you?" First real question he'd ever asked me. The golden boy and the deleted kid, both scribbled out, standing in a hallway the world was trying to erase. Enemies didn't really apply anymore. The three of us ended up cornered, me, Zoe, and a hollowed-out Julian, with the revision closing in from every side, red static eating the edges of the world. There was exactly one way out, and it was the last direction anyone sane would run. Down. Into the margins. Into the backstage graveyard where the author kept its cut characters and its machinery. The place old Mark got stuck and never left. The only way to stop being edited was to go find the thing holding the pen. Zoe squeezed my hand. Julian, terrified and human for the first time in his life, said, "This is insane." "Yeah," I said, and I could see the gray door yawning open ahead of us. But they wrote me as unpredictable. Might as well use it. And we ran toward the one place you're never supposed to go behind the story. The margins weren't empty this time. At the center stood the author's machinery, not a person, just a towering column of red editing text, cursors blinking by the thousands, rewriting reality line by line. And when it saw me, it didn't attack. It made an offer. The Cast app filled my whole vision with one prompt, warm and reasonable. Cast author offer, restore original role, protagonist, Y/N. There it was, everything I'd wanted since the coffee spill. My deleted role handed back. Main character, officially no more grinding, no more gray fingers. All I had to do was press yes. And God, I wanted to. But I'd read enough of the author's notes by then to see the trap in the punctuation. Restore original role. Not be free, restore. Put back on the page, back under the pen. A protagonist is still a character someone else writes, and cuts again the second he gets inconvenient. It wasn't an offer. It was a leash with a nicer collar. When I hesitated, the machine offered a second path, colder and cleaner. The app pulsed over Julian. Cast alternative, complete siphon. Absorb main character fully. Permanent, irreversible. Take the rest of Julian. All of it. Every scrap of luck and shine and story he had left, drained into me forever, and I'd be the main character for real. No author required, no leash, self-made on the bones of the guy who'd humiliated me at the door. And here's the ugly part, it would have been so easy. He deserved it, the old me whispered, except that voice was his, bled in through the threads. And Julian, hollow and exhausted, just closed his eyes and said, "Do it." I was never real anyway. At least this way I'd be worth something. He meant it. He'd been a puppet so long, he'd rather be fuel than nothing. And I realized taking him wouldn't make me the main character. It'd just make me the next author. My hand was already moving. The bleed was screaming. 41% of me leaning toward yes, take it, finally win. And Zoe caught my wrist. She didn't yell. She just said the thing that cut through all of it. Kai, if you take his story, you'll never have your own. You'll just be wearing another person for the rest of your life, same as they did to you. And that landed because that was the whole thing, wasn't it? The author cut me and gave my life to an easier character. Julian coasted on borrowed shine his whole life. Every single player in this game got where they were by wearing someone else. And I was one button press from becoming exactly that. The most main character move available to me. And it was just the oldest trick in the book. Theft with better lighting. I took my hand off the prompt. Instead, I did the thing I was apparently cut for. I went off script. I pulled up my own file, Mercer K, that red CUT stamp, and the app offered me something it had been quietly saving. Cast rewrite available. Edit one line of your own script. One line. I looked at that red CUT, the decision someone made about my whole life without asking me, and I dragged my finger through it, struck it out. And underneath, in cyan, my color not gold, not stolen, I wrote 4 words. I decide from here. The margins shuddered, because that's not something a character does. That's something an author does. I hadn't taken Julian's role or accepted the leash. I'd grabbed the pen and written on my own page for the first time in 20 years. Small line. Wrong hand entirely, as far as the author was concerned. The author did not take that well. The whole red column reared up and lashed out. A whip of pure delete aimed straight at the anomaly writing on its pages. At me. And Julian moved. Julian Ashe, who'd never done a single thing in his life that wasn't scripted for him, threw himself in front of it. The strike hit him full on and he lit up red, edges fraying, but he held. Go, he gritted out, before it recompiles. This is the first thing I've ever actually chosen. And I finally understood him. He wasn't the villain. He was just another kid handed a role he never asked for, plot armor instead of a personality. And now, deleting in front of me, he was more real than he'd ever been on top. The Golden Boy's first genuine act was buying 2 deleted nobodies 10 seconds. It was also his best. Julian's sacrifice bought me one clear look at the thing, and that look changed everything. Up close, under all the menacing red and the god cursor theatrics, the author wasn't a god at all. It was code. Plain, ordinary, editable lines of it, scrolling behind the intimidation like a curtain with a very small man behind it. It wanted us to think it was fate, destiny, the unchangeable pen of the universe. But it was a system, a program, rules someone wrote, which meant rules that could be rewritten. I'd spent this whole story trying to climb a cast list some machine assigned me, terrified of the thing at the top. And the thing at the top was just a script that had never once been told no. I looked at Zoe. I looked at the fraying red silhouette of Julian holding the line. And I stopped running from the pen. I walked toward it. The author threw everything it had at me, and its weapon was the same lie it had always used. Red text stamped the air, huge, absolute. Roles are fixed. Assets do not write. Background characters do not speak. It was the whole belief system of the world I'd grown up invisible in, printed in 50-foot letters. Some people are main characters. Some people are set dressing. Stay in your lane. Know your role. And for 20 years I'd believed it, because everyone believes it, the rich kids because it flatters them, the rest of us because it's easier than fighting. But I'd read the source code now. I knew the ugly secret at the bottom of it. The roles weren't fixed. They were just assigned early and defended hard, and everyone agreed not to check. So I looked up at that giant red lie, and I said the most dangerous thing an asset can say. No. And then I did the opposite of everything the game had taught me. I turned my back on the author entirely, walked over to the nearest drifting gray husk, a woman who'd been reading a book with no pages since before I was born, and instead of siphoning her, I gave. I opened my own cyan and poured a little into her and wrote her a line. "You are not finished." Color bled back into her. She looked at her own hands. She gasped, first sound anyone in the margins had made in forever. See, siphoning was still the author's game. Take from below, feed the top, keep the pyramid standing. But authoring meant I could write a role for anyone. And there were hundreds of forgotten people down here who'd been told they didn't get one. So I stopped stealing main character energy, and I started handing it out. That's when protagonist mode finally kicked in, and it wasn't gold. It was cyan all the way through. Mine. Earned, not siphoned. Because it turns out the thing that actually makes you the main character was never luck or money or plot armor. It's what you do when you finally have the pen and a room full of people the world forgot. The old rule needed someone beneath you to feed on. I broke it. I rewrote my own power source. I got stronger by lifting people up instead of by being stepped on. Every husk I woke two more. The margins started filling with color and voices, and people remembering they existed. And above my head, for the first time since the coffee spill, my label stopped glitching and resolved, clean and steady and unredacted. Not stolen, not assigned, written by me. And I wasn't alone anymore. Zoe blazed teal beside me, writing lines faster than I could, an artist finally allowed to draw people as real. Old Mark came shuffling out of the gray the second, dimmer Mark and the real one, both. And as I wrote him a role, his buffering eyes cleared for the first time in years. Even Julian, fraying and red-edged, dragged himself up to stand with us, a main character choosing, at the very end, to be one of the background people he'd never once noticed. A whole crowd of the forgotten, the cut, the deleted, the overlooked, every person that world had decided didn't matter, standing together and writing themselves back onto the page. And the towering red author, the machine that ran on everyone agreeing to stay small, started to crack down the middle, because its whole power was the silence, and we were extremely done being quiet. Here's the part I'm weirdly proud of. I didn't delete it. Would have been easy. Rip the whole thing down, burn the pen, be the guy who killed the god. But that's just the author's move in a different jacket. Decide who gets erased. I'd had enough of things getting erased. So instead I reached into the cracking red code, found the core rule, the line that started all of it. The author writes. The characters obey, and I didn't strike it out. I just added one line underneath in cyan, and the characters may write themselves. That's it. Didn't destroy the system. Freed it. Turned a dictatorship of one pen into a world where everybody got to hold one. The red column shuddered, and then quietly, almost relieved, it stopped fighting. Even the thing at the top, I think, was tired of being the only one allowed to choose. And then the margins just opened. The gray backstage folded up and let its light back in, and all those forgotten people walked out into an ordinary Tuesday like they'd never been gone, except now they moved like they meant it. The barista who'd forgotten me looked up and said, "Hey, you," like she'd known me all along. The husks became students, teachers, a woman finally finishing her book. The whole campus exhaled. Nobody but us would ever know the world used to run on a script, that some people were props and some were stars, and a machine upstream decided which. They just knew, suddenly, that they were allowed to want things. It doesn't sound like much. It's everything. I stood in the sun with cyan fading gently out of my eye, an ordinary tired guy in a hoodie again, and for the first time that felt like a choice instead of a sentence. It's been a few months, and here's the wild part. Nothing magic happens anymore, and that's exactly how I know it worked. No labels floating over heads, no gold threads, no cyan pull, no red cursor waiting in the corner of my eye. Just a normal campus full of people who, as far as they know, always got to choose. My eye doesn't glitch. And the one time I checked old habit, my own label was just steady. Clear, not redacted, not stolen, not assigned by some machine upstream. Written by the only author who gets a say now. Turns out being the main character of your life isn't a role you win off somebody else. It's just the moment you stop waiting for permission to have one. Took me 20 years, a haunted app, and a war with a text editor to figure that out. Growth. And the money, the whole reason a broke kid taps a cursed app in the first place. The money came, but this time it was mine. No siphon. That little design tool I'd rebuilt during the grind. I kept building it after the magic switched off, with skills I actually owned now instead of borrowed, and it caught. Real users. Real revenue. The first check that cleared, I sat in my tiny office and just stared at it, waiting for it to be stolen, for the luck to reverse, for someone to redact me. It didn't. It was just mine because I made it. Broke commuter kid with $4.13. And now, I'm the guy who quietly pays the tab for the table of scholarship kids in the corner and leaves before they can thank me. Rags to riches, sure. But the good kind. The kind you get to keep, because nobody's wearing you to get it. Julian didn't delete, by the way. He frayed right to the edge and came back, but the gold never did, and honestly, thank God. Without the plot armor, he's just a guy. A slightly awkward, weirdly funny guy who spent the last few months learning how to have an actual personality from scratch. Like a foal figuring out its legs. We get cheap coffee from a food truck now, which I find deeply hilarious given how we met. He apologized for the door, the coffee, all of it, clumsy and real. No audience, no mic. I didn't know I was doing it, he said. I didn't know I was anything but the part. Yeah, I said. Nobody does until they are not. The main character and the deleted extra, splitting a $2 coffee, both finally off script. Weird timeline. Better one. I found old Mark on his last day. He'd gotten his story back. The real one, not the leftover that mopped floors and warned kids in boiler rooms. Turned out he had a whole life the author had filed away when he climbed too high and overwrote himself into nothing. A daughter, a workshop, a name that wasn't the janitor. He hung his coveralls on the hook, left the big jailers keying behind, and stopped at the gate. You did the thing I couldn't, kid, he said, and his eyes didn't buffer once. I tried to climb the cast list. You tore the list up. Borrowed the idea from a guy with a mop, I said. He laughed, actually laughed, and walked out into a Tuesday he'd been locked out of for 15 years. Some save points you set for yourself. Some you get to be for somebody else. And Zoe, the other deleted kid, the one the system swore I could never take anything from, because there was nothing to take but everything worth having. We're okay. I'm not going to narrate my love life. I have some dignity. But she flipped her sketchbook to a new drawing the other day. The two of us on this same roof, and the caption underneath didn't say, "Guy who thinks nobody sees him anymore." It said, "Guy who wrote himself back." I put the cracked phone in a drawer that morning, the cursed one, screen still shattered, cast app dark. Didn't smash it, didn't sell it. Just retired it. I don't need a system to tell me my role anymore, and I definitely don't need one to tell me hers. 2 mistakes they scrubbed out. Sitting on a rooftop they were never supposed to reach, writing our own next page. Slowly. On purpose. In pen. Last thing. I was on the bus last week. Still take the bus, it's good for me, and I looked up, and over some tired stranger's head, just for a second I saw it. Faint. Red at the edges. Flickering. Redacted. Another one. Another person written off, filed away, told they were background in their own life. And somewhere across the city, in a drawer, a cracked phone I retired buzzed exactly once. I didn't go over. Didn't hand them an app or a speech. I just caught their eye and gave them a nod. The kind nobody ever gave me when I was invisible. Because here's the only cheat code that was ever real. Everybody's the main character of something. Every single person on this bus. Some of us just spent our whole lives waiting for a memo that was never coming. So this is me sending it. Your role's not assigned. Grab the pen. Your move.